progress.
Okay, dear friends, I want to share with you an original interpretation in a pasuk in Parshas Ekev. There's a well-known interpretation, and perhaps we could add something very powerful. The pasuk says, "Eretz asher tamid einei Hashem Elokecha ba me'reishis Hashanah ad achar Shana." That the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, is a land that the eyes of God are upon from the beginning of the year until the end of year. Me'reishis Hashanah ad achar Shana. So there's a well-known observation. Why does it say Me'reishis Hashanah, the beginning of the year, and then when it talks at the end of the year, it's Achros Shana, not Achros Hashanah? So there's a comment, maybe a sharp comment, a humorous comment, a biting comment, all of the above from the Satmar Rebbe, that every year when the year begins, we say, oh, this year is going to be the year, we're going to become completely different, we're going to revolutionize ourselves, and then when the year comes to an end, we realize it's only Achros Shana. That's human nature. When there's a new beginning, you have a fresh start, you want to really do something special, and then you realize it was just an ordinary, average, pedestrian year. If I could share with you another interpretation in a different vein. I have an interesting sefer here. It's called Sichos im Shlomo Hoffman. Shlomo Hoffman was a student of Ponevezh, Rav Isaac Sher, was later a therapist for troubled individuals, and he has very interesting and illuminating, insightful svarim. He tells a story that in 1953, the night of Yom Kippur, in the first year that the Ponevezh Yeshiva opened up, so between Kol Nidrei and Marav, everyone lined up to give Rav Kahanaman a gutiyar. It was a very long line. By the way, I heard from a friend of mine, Rav Yechiel Novik, Rosh of Ashdod, that he remembers that the night of Rosh Hashanah, the Ponevezh Rav would daven a very long Shemona Esrei with bechiyos neiros, with awesome tears and crying, and then afterwards everybody would come to be nisparech from the Ponevezh Rav. And this was Leil Yom Kippur. And there's a long line, and if you're ever on a line to give shalom to a Rosh Yeshiva in a yeshiva on a Shabbos or Yom Tif, the most you could say is good Shabbos, good Yom Tov. Maybe you could have a word or two. You could say, good to see the Rosh Yeshiva. That was a nice shmooh. You can't. It's not a time to say, brother, you have a few minutes for me to tell you over my bar mitzvah pshatel. There's a line of 500 people behind you. You can't. You can't really. It's like you're at. Imagine you're on the New Jersey Turnpike, and you stop your car to chat with some car that's pulled off on the side of the road to catch up on you can't do that there. Anyway, Shlomo Hoffman, he's a bacher. It's his turn to meet the Ponevezh Rav, and the Ponevezh Rav grabs him by the arm. He says, come with me to the Merpeset of opposite Yeshiva Ponevezh. And everyone's astounded. Not only is the Ponevezh Rav stopping, he's literally took this guy and he walked out of the yeshiva. What's going on over here? He took Shlomo Hoffman to the Merpeset. He said, let's count the floor tiles in Yeshiva's Ponevezh. And they're counting 1, 2, 100, 150, 500, 700, 1,700. And he said, you see, you laughed at me. You thought I can never do it. Now you see that I brought it to reality. He didn't say one word about Yom Kippur. He didn't say one word about the holiness of the day. He took him outside and they counted floor tiles. He went back, the Ponevezh Rav, to the Mizrach Vant, and Gemar Chasima Toiva, Gutiyar, Gemar Chasima Toiva. And Rav Hoffman said that a few years earlier, he had visited the Ponevezh Rav. By the way, when the Second World War broke out, the Ponevezh Yeshiva was in South Africa collecting money for his institutions back in Lita. He couldn't get back to Europe, so he went to Eretz Yisrael. The money he collected in South Africa for the yeshivas in Ponevezh, he used it to buy the parcel of land that later the Ponevezh Yeshiva was built in Bnei Brak. So Rav Hoffman, when he was even younger, visited the Ponevezh Yeshiva, and the Ponevezh Yeshiva spread out on the table the architectural plans of Ponevezh Yeshiva, and he showed him, you see such a big base medrash, till then, they didn't have Batei Midrashim that held more than 100 to 150 people. And the Ponevezh Yeshiva had architectural plans with a base medrash to hold 1,000 Talmidim, and it didn't even have columns in it. It was the first yeshiva that was so massive, and they didn't need to use like those poles in the middle of the hot water pipes in the middle of the yeshiva. And Ponevezh Yeshiva looks at Shlomo Hoffman and he's laughing. Shlomo Hoffman is laughing. A yeshiva in the 50s for 1,000 yeshiva-lite. There weren't even 1,000 yeshiva students in the whole of Israel in 1950. And a few years later, the first Yom Kippur, the Ponevezh Yeshiva, in middle of the line, took this boy out and he said, you see, I told you I could do it. Count the floor tiles. I don't understand, it's Yom Kippur. It's a time of Teshuvah. He's showing him the floor tiles. They're counting floor tiles. He's saying, you laughed at me? And Rosh Shlomo Hoffman said, there's a very important lesson over here. Even more important than understanding the holiness of the day is understanding the historicity, the proportion of the opportunity that we have at the beginning of the year. Not to sell yourself short. You need to always dream big at the beginning of the year. You need to have big plans for yourself of what you could try to accomplish. Of course, very often, the most lasting change is only small little steps of improvement in learning, in tefillah, in mein adam lachaveroi. But on the same time, you always have to try to dream big in ruchnius. What kind of great accomplishments can you aspire to? If you don't aspire to greatness, you won't even achieve mediocrity. Like Rabbi Ovadia Yosef would say, and the Chavetz Chaim would say, anyone who doesn't want to be a general won't even be a regular soldier. Therefore, the Torah tells us, you want Acharis Shana, you want to have a future, it always has to be Meireshis HaShana. Oh, yes, it's human nature that by the end, sometimes it fizzles out. But if you want to have a future, you want to have an Acharis, it always has to be Hashana. You need to say Reishis Hashana. It's not, you can't just say, oh, it's just another year. No, we're still in the beginning of the year. You could still dream big this year. This year you could upgrade yourself in your Torah, in your Tefillah, in your Midos, in your Shamayim. You could take it to untapped levels, unparalleled levels. You always need to say, if you want to have a future, you want to have an Acharis, whatever age you're at, you always have to say Reishis Hashana. You got to have architectural plans for big things that you want to accomplish. Maybe you will accomplish them, maybe you won't accomplish them, but you always have to aspire to them. It always needs to be Reishis Hashana. So it's, on the one hand, we always say, try to accept upon yourself one or two little small improvements in the beginning of the year. Because realistically speaking, those are the things that stick. But at the same time, you always need to aspire that this year is going to be the year. You're going to turn it all around this year. Maybe at the end of the year, maybe it won't all last. But it's good to start with big aspirations. Anyway, Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful Shabbos Shuvah. We'll see everybody. Bez Hashem, you could join us Monday, and you'll see about further opportunities as the week passes. Okay? A good Shabbos, a good Tiyar. Merci Tova, Joe. Kol Tov. All the best. Kol Tov.
Recording stopped. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Yaakov.